Thank you so much. So, for this conversation, I wanted to do a couple of things. I wanted to introduce you to our organization beyond what you just saw in the video and talk about our value proposition, and that will inform how we use geospatial imaging. So, one of the things you'll notice about that video is even though our mission is to help communities confront the dual challenges of the digital divide and climate change. We didn't show you disaster photos. We didn't show you climate impacted communities. We showed you people in joy. We showed you clips of their culture. We showed you pictures of them working with us to do the kinds of projects that have value to them. And there is a reason for that, is that part of incorporating public policy and science and GIS and other technologies into communities is to celebrate the capacity and to lead with the value proposition that there are assets and value in these communities. And we're not just talking about vulnerability and divestment and all of the negatives. So one of our ways that we work, and we talk about people in our three pillars, people, public, and planet. When we talk about people, we are very intentional about surfacing the experiences of people, but doing so in a positive way. And when we can, showing triumph. One of those pictures there where you heard a lot of laughter is we had finished a landscaping exercise and we were able to present it to the municipal mayor where we were in Puerto Rico. And that was us being happy and in joy after we had seen the impact of the work that we do. The second piece of it is when we talk about working for the public, this is where we use the data analysis and the citizen science and some of the work that I talked about during the panel to, one, close the information gap when we're talking about communities, and two, do the resourcing gap. And because we are celebrating GIS Day in the DMV, I wanted to show you some work that we had done in the District of Columbia and in Baltimore, respectively, using story maps, of which we are big fans at the Undivide project. We do a lot of work with Esri, so you'll see a lot of Esri products in our work. And I'm going to enlarge my screen and show you what we're looking at. So we were asked to do a series of studies in Buzzard Point. And for those of you all who don't know the history of Buzzard Point, I'm going to send you a great link to the entire project that I and the Undivide project team, as well as with some support from Georgetown University and the University of the District of Columbia, did researching from Buzzard Point's evolution from a mixed immigrant community that had always been cited for industrial uses, dating from being a dumping site for construction materials and leftover refuse from the construction of the White House, all the way up to the hazardous waste siting facilities that I am going to show you on this map. And so what we did in this map was we overlaid urban heat with where there's hazardous waste, a crime index, and a 10-minute access to grocery stores. And I intentionally set this on the hazardous waste sites because a lot of times when we talk about disaster response or we talk about climate change, we're talking about planetary systems issues, meaning like heat, flooding, sea level rise risk, but we don't talk about how those things interact with waste and pollution that are present in a community. And that's important for the communities that we work with and also emergency managers who are thinking about what they're walking into and the portfolio of needs, as well as the people in that community knowing what their risk truly is when we combine all of these factors and how to advocate for it. So when you look at a map like this is where there's a Superfund site. And so when you use terms like overburden, you can see that in this small area, we've got two Superfund sites. And then these other purple ones that you're looking at are organizations that are on the toxic release inventory and the name of the organization, or these are sites where we know that there is a potential EPA site, but it hasn't been determined yet, but the communities identify that as a hazard. And the other thing that we wanted to answer for anyone who's interested in serving these communities is who lives there. So using a mix of census and community survey data and our own data that we collected in the community using those citizen sciences that we talked about, we went block by block to learn who lived there, who is next to these three potential toxic sites that has an area with an urban heat risk, and that we can see is right in the Anacostia watershed and susceptible to all of the flood risk and sea level rise risk that comes with being in a coastal city like DC. And we learned that in this particular block, we have a population that's that's of working age and older. It is majority minority, so 17% Hispanic or Latino or Latinx, however you would like to say it, and then 46% of Black or African descent, and then two or more races make up 16% of the population. And so when we talk about how we can use imaging, we can take a look at, let's get out of this, how we can use this to help people understand their risk for a variety of different populations. And then the next thing that I want to, so I'm going to stop sharing and talk a little bit about the importance of having a holistic understanding of what communities face. And so the fourth prong of that, of everything that I showed you, is also Buzzard Point doesn't have consistent access to public Wi-Fi. There's a shortage of what we call anchor institutions, or institutions that offer access within their facilities, as well as an issue with the cost of access to broadband in that community. So we've got an organization that is fully divested. But where technology was able to help them was to create that map that showed them the portfolio of risk. And then there's another piece on there where we incorporated videos, and the community came together with a group of policy recommendations and helped to build a coalition to talk to the mayor's office about this risk portfolio that they now understand down to the granularity of a block by block assessment of what's going on in that particular community. And so that speaks to the ethos of the way that the Undivide project approaches our work, but also the importance of incorporating science into this work and how it can have a direct impact, not just on how we think about communities broadly, but an impact on a community in DC, in your block, if you use things rightly. The next thing that I wanted to show you was a project that we did in Baltimore, and this is close to my heart for two reasons. One is Baltimore is actually the place that inspired the formation of the Undivide project. I was doing research with the university about access to fiber for broadband connections. And when we got there, we saw a whole other set of risk portfolios, the combination of Baltimore having been one of the most redlined cities on the East Coast historically, of looking at the aftermath of the war on drugs in that community, the very present aftermath and collective trauma of the Freddie Gray issue and some of the protests that followed that, as well as planetary systems issues that again come with a former Rust Belt city on the East Coast that has all of the issues that come with natural hazards that are with those risks, overlaid with the particularities of Baltimore. And so when we saw this, this was our first awareness of how we needed to rethink the way that we both approached understanding risk and how we visualized it for folks. Another reason why I'm excited about Baltimore is that we're expanding this work with our friends at New Light Technology and have some exciting regional work that we're going to be doing centered around Baltimore and the DMV. So I'm super excited to see us go to the next level with these communities and have even more of an impact and do more good work. So I am going to show you and walk you through a story map that we did with a number of constituents in Baltimore. Again, I'm hitting this theme super hard about how we work with communities and not in communities. But it lays out earlier when I talked about saying divested communities over vulnerable, because there are structural reasons why a community might be divested. And so this helps us understand assets versus access. And we focused on the issues of internet access in Baltimore, but surrounded by all of the issues of being able to or not being able to access critical assets or even information during disasters and climate events. And so what you're looking at here, and the text outlines it, I won't read it to you, is that a significant portion of Baltimore's population that is low SES and people of color and at high risk for natural hazards do not have reliable internet access. And this means that there will be issues with receiving timely emergency alerts and also being able to go online, use social media, follow different accounts. This doesn't mean that they're not getting digital information. It means that they're cell phone dependent, which means they're making some household financial decisions about how they get access to community resources. And we use this map a couple of times in this map story, but I'm just going to walk you through what we're looking at here. So what's populating right now is who has broadband access and who doesn't. So I'm going to zoom in more on Baltimore. And what we did was, in using some of that citizen science that we talked about, as well as archived maps and information available through a variety of Esri's databases, was the purple shows you who has fiber optic coverage, right? So there's a lot of purple, if you can see, in the suburbs, around downtown Baltimore, Fells Point, the wealthier neighborhoods. Then when you get out here in West Baltimore and you click on part of that, you can see there is no purple, which means that people don't have consistent, reliable access to fiber optic cable to access the internet. What you will see is anchor institutions. So you see people have to go to the library to access internet, or they are dependent on public Wi-Fi, or they're using cell data to access digital resources. And again, if you look at the lower SES heavily Black parts of the city, even when we're talking about access to public Wi-Fi and anchor institutions, it gets incredibly sparse, and those are more centered around the downtown area and the center of the city. And so people knew this anecdotally, but they did not know how to prove it. And so the important part of doing this map and doing the research with the community was giving them a proof to help others understand the divestment that they were facing. We also combine the internet and technology work with other activities. So community gardens are an important part of addressing food insecurity issues. They can also help with urban heat and serve as part of vegetation management tactics to help cool down parts of the neighborhood. And in this particular picture, we were doing a combination of the two. And it's on the other side of this little pole, but we were actually putting both a thermometer and a sensor out there so that we could measure temperatures. And these are some of the awesome young people in the community that went and got trained on how to configure and maintain a network and how to pull down data from sensors to be able to help us continue collecting that information. And it was a fun day with lots of pizza and engaging with young people, which is one of my favorite things to do because they always come up with solutions and ideas that we'd never think about. We wanted to give a snapshot of the multi-hazard portfolio of Baltimore. And so we just went to Climate Check, that a lot of organizations can use. And this is just a look at all of the things that Baltimore faces at any given point in time. And so here's a look at the risk through 2050. And so people can go to this at any moment and walk through this flood map and through this map story and get a sense of their risk. And we did a correlation of this to income as well as access to the internet. The other thing that we did was to help people understand how they got in this situation. So we actually linked up with some oral historians and we put part of this in the story map. And I'm going to show you the tab here. A history of Sandtown, Baltimore, and how it began with Freedmen post-Civil War. And early on in its history, we began the cycle of redlining, restrictive covenants, and unfortunately, which is up until recent times, issues with corruption and access to adequate political representation in Baltimore. And so we pulled together this map story to help anyone online who wants to understand the work and the need and the risk and how to approach it in the city better, But also we chose a story map for a couple of reasons when we're talking about access to technology. One, no matter what generation you're from, you have some awareness of how to use a map and how to engage with storytelling. And two, it's easy to manipulate, as you saw, or work with if you do have online access. But we formatted that and worked with our colleagues within the Undivide project in Esri to make it downloadable. So you can pull it down like a magazine article and just read it that way if you're divested. And so that is how we work with people and with the public at the Undivide project. And then the third way we do it is for the planet, is what we say. We do a lot of policy recommendations at the local, national, and even international level to make sure that these experiences and truths and solutions that are developed at the community level make their way into the hands of policy writers so that we do get scalable change and we get scalable awareness of this. And so I'm paying very, very close attention to my time as we go through. And I am going to share with you a few different ways that you can reach us and so you can visit us online, and here is our website, and you can take a look at some more information and some of the projects that we do. And also, we have a YouTube channel where we invest in a tremendous amount of storytelling with communities. And so you can take a look at some of the community work and videos that we've put together. And you can also watch our podcast, which again features change makers in this space, community leaders that we've worked with, and um, other organizations that we feel like are doing a great job of leveraging technology to help deal with existential crises. And so there is our link tree where you can look at any or all of those things if you like. And I will pause to see if there are any questions or comments about what I've just shared. And then if not, I have an open call.
Um, I'm not sure if there are questions, but I do have a question. So first of all, thank you for a fascinating presentation and great work in the Undivide project. I guess my question to you is, you talked a lot about working with the community. Going back to the question that I asked Brooke, do you have any tips on how to share complex data with communities, like complex GIS data, relationships between phenomena, in a way that will actually make sense?
Yeah, and not to sound pedantic or oversimplify, but ask. One thing I learned from my humanitarian work in responding to large scale crises is that no matter where you are, every community has a stoop. And on that stoop, you will find the informal leaders who can tell you any and everything about the community and the people who live there, including how they like to receive information. And so, what we learned in Baltimore is that there are a few organizations that work with young people. And we went and talked to them, and what we found were young people who grew up as digital natives but had never been exposed to this technology. But the delta between them being phenomenal at communicating on social media platforms and other things and helping them to understand how to use a tool like ArcGIS or Planet or some of the other ones that are out there was short. So those were the perfect people to do training with. Conversely, working in DC, we found that our most available communicators and learners were seniors. And it being the district and having a high population of people that had worked in government or in policy, what we found in some of the senior centers or as board members on different organizations were people who did actually have great geography and data analytics skills. It was just at a point where this was done in analog. So it was just a matter of translating that knowledge to a digital platform. And then once we have our first set of interlocutors, transferring that knowledge to other communities and having them do things like train the trainer and divestment just flowed naturally from there. And so ask.
Yep, that's a good advice. So, Monica, thank you so much. And Lucio,